Hey everybody, coming back to you from the dungeon, doing a little practicing, the old routine. So today I did a few covers the other day and got reminded of a very early influence of mine and hugely impactful band in my kind of musical upbringing and my early influences so I thought I'd do a little video before I forget again, basically. And so if you look at the title of the video, the band I'm talking about is Deftones, and the drummer for Deftones is named Abe Cunningham. And to give you a bit of an intro to, my intro to the band, the first thing I had heard from Deftones likely was the music video for the song Bored. The first album from Deftones, Adrenaline, that's released in, I want to say 95, 96, I think 1995. And at that time I was watching, I'm in Canada, I was watching Much Music, which is, the Canadian equivalent of MTV for my American friends. And there was a heavy metal centric show that was called the Power Hour, the Power 30. It had different names over the years, but the video for Bored was likely the first thing I heard from Deftones via that show. And pretty intriguing, and I was definitely into it. I was like, they had the connection to Korn. At this time I had already discovered Korn, and was into like these new metal, like up and coming bands, and discovering these different bands than my older siblings were into. I was discovering my own kind of way in music, and Deftones are one of the very early bands kind of along that route. And the first Deftones album to me is it's a great album. It's not one that I often go back and revisit, and I look at some of the songs off of it, and a song like Engine Number 9 is amazing. 7 Words, Root is another great song. But honestly, it's not an album that I often go back to. And for me, it's just my opinion on this, but it's almost like the band and the albums that come after the first one from Deftones it changed immensely. And it's, Deftones are kind of one of those bands, in my opinion, that say what you will about some of their albums and some of the releases, but to me, they're one of the very few bands I could think of for myself that have gotten better over time. And each new subsequent release kind of ends up being like a favorite of mine, whereas there's very few bands that meant a lot to me as a young teenager or whatever, that I even, sometimes I don't even know they have a new album out, but pretty much all of the subsequent Deftones albums that have been released have all been amazing to me. And so back to Adrenaline, influential, yes, and a great introduction to the band, but the real kind of catalyst moment for me with them, and really making Deftones one of my favorite bands of all time, is the album they put out in 1997 called Around the Fur. I think it was 97, maybe 98, I don't remember. Sometimes the video gets released in 97 and then the album's 98. You can get old. What are you gonna do? Look it up for yourself if you're curious of the year, but it's in and around that time. And the first single released off of Around the Fur was another video that I would have seen, and it was for the song My Own Summer, parentheses, Shove It, whatever, the title of the song is. I call it My Own Summer. And the music video for that, it was very, very cool and very 90s, and it was just such a great song. And the second album, Around the Fur, is where Deftones really kind of narrow down what they are. Narrow it down isn't even the right word, because at the same time they're finding this their own sound and their own niche, but they're also expanding their soundscape big time. I can't remember if that's the first album where they introduce, they have a DJ I just call him a DJ. I don't know exactly what his role is, but he's introducing soundscape and ambience into their songs. It's one great thing about Deftones is they can be a little bit polarizing for people. Sometimes the vocals get a little grating, and I've always found Chino's vocals to be kind of like weirdly soothing, and like there's just something about his vocal delivery that I just find, even when he goes into the screaming, I am not aggravated by it in any way. I sense a lot of emotion from his delivery in the songs, and it really translates well for me. And get into Around the Fur. That album, another one of my friends has it. I borrow it, make a tape, and just, I think I went out and bought it like not that much longer after that, because I had to have it on CD. And I got tired of rewinding the tape, so it was better to have it on CD. But recently, the handful of Deftones covers that I tackled were pretty much all from this album. My Own Summer Shove It, that's the first single off of there. Lahabia, I don't know how to say that. Lahabia? Doesn't matter. Around the Fur, amazing song, Around the Fur. Ricketts, super heavy song. I remember around this time, I mentioned previously in another video, I used to watch a lot of late night TV, David Letterman, and Conan O'Brien was my favorite, because Conan always, whoever was in charge of the musical direction there really had their ear to the ground, as far as kind of like young bands. And a very early appearance of Deftones I saw was them on Conan, playing Be Quiet and Drive. And, just watching the band, they were so getting to Abe Cunningham. He was such a powerhouse drummer. He hit so hard, and he had such a good swing, and just his playing was so good. And so he had such good groove, and, he was really good at note displacement and playing like kind of non-linear phrases. And he introduced all these really interesting concepts for drumming to me. I didn't really know the names of what some of these concepts were, but I was, the context was being put out in the music for me. And so just sitting down to learn some of these songs was like a real challenge at the time. I was about 15 or 16, something like that. A song like Lotion is just a powerhouse, just a crazy, so much energy in the band. And I think all the guys in the band really convey that. Like, they just have such an energetic kind of spirit to them. And MX, Head Up. If you don't know the album Around the Fur, I hugely encourage you to go check it out, because it's an insanely good album and a real kind of like high watermark of the 90s, nu metal. That's kind of like the last time that Deftones really kind of stays in that wheelhouse for me of nu metal, because post Around the Fur, when you get into the album that comes after that, which is White Pony, which was kind of it must be their big album. I think it had the biggest singles off of it, and Change in the House of Flies, and Back to School, and like those songs were kind of everywhere at that time. They were like the precursor to Linkin Park almost. I sometimes feel Deftones should have been what Linkin Park was, but it never worked out for them. So, post Around the Fur, they start diverging off and doing their own thing. And there is I love bands that are that way, where there's almost no rules. And the expectation is they do what they want, and it's for them. And I think all good art is that anyways. If, ultimately at the end of the day, you're doing it for yourself. And if it should please you as the artist, and if people like it, that's great. And if they don't, if it pleases you, then that's all that really matters. And I feel with White Pony, they start getting into that. And, maybe taking risks, a little bit. I'm sure probably a lot of people at their record label wanted just another, Around the Fur. And, there's elements of some of that nu metal stuff on this album. But, you get into a song like Digital Bath, it's just like that's so far removed from anything that is on Around the Fur or that's on Adrenaline. It's an amazing ambient song and a lot of emotion, and like there's a real dark element to it that I'm kind of attracted to as well. A song like Elite, super heavy song. Teenager is an amazing song. Knife Party, crazy drum track on that one. That was I remember having a lot of difficulty learning that one. There was just a ton of drumming, and sometimes it can get a little busy. But Abe Cunningham always has a way to his drum sound and his snare sound really kind of cuts through this really thick mix, and so it doesn't kind of get in the way or get messy. It's not cluttered sounding. There's a lot of clarity to the drums and the drum parts, and that's all based on Abe's ability. And yeah, getting back to a song like Digital Bath, the drum pattern is just so broken up. It's like it's almost like a not a fusion thing, but almost like a Steve Gadd kind of pattern. Just nothing's kind of straight and linear. It's all broken up with different like little accents and things like that. It's such a cool drum part and so hard to play it accurately, and I still can't really kind of pull it off. I do some version of it, but it's definitely not as good as what Abe does for sure. Knife Party, I mentioned. Korea, very heavy song. My favorite song off White Pony ends up being Passenger. Really, really unique kind of drum part to that one as well. Similar in a way to Digital Bath, but yeah, just this very ambient drum sound, and it kind of carries the song, and a lot of dynamics, like big dynamic shifts, which I really, really took a lot of inspiration from with this band. The album that comes after White Pony, I was in a band around 2002. The band was called Slang Doll, and Norm, my friend from this band, we took a lot of like similar inspiration from like a lot of ambient music. We were listening to like bands like 30 Seconds to Mars, and we were kind of showing each other things. Like we're all we're listening to music that was kind of in the same wheelhouse, but it would be a different band. So I would show him Deftones, and he would show me like more Smashing Pumpkin or something. We're just always trading off ideas, but it was always music that was kind of in the same vein, which was pretty cool. And so around the time that we had this band, Deftones put out their album. I'm sorry, I keep having to reference it. I can never remember. A self-titled album they put out in 2003. And that was kind of like, White Pony was the high watermark, and then it kind of starts trailing off, and then maybe it just gets a little lower. It never really goes down to zero with them. They've always maintained their popularity, but they definitely had that high watermark with White Pony and went below that. So self-titled album in 2003. That album's release coincided with the band I was playing in, and I pulled so much inspiration from that. Like a song like Hexagram, Minerva, which is a great song. At this point, Deftones starts shifting into kind of like these really ambient, mid-tempo kind of songs, and wide open space for the drumming, and just big drum sounds, and Abe's ability to kind of shift in that paradigm of the band, to go from these kind of high energy, almost punk or kind of like not hardcore, but very, very high energy, and then shift to this whole other thing where they're playing like long kind of songs that are, medium tempos, like just the range of a drummer like that it's very inspiring to me, and the creativity that comes along with that as well is why he's always remained one of my favorite drummers. But yeah, like a Battle Axe is another song off of the self-titled album from 2003. Just these great kind of mid-tempo songs and awesome choruses and stuff. To kind of not wrap it up so much, but to get into some of the later stuff from Deftones, Saturday Night Wrist is actually probably in hindsight, it might be my favorite album. It's definitely the one I listen to the most, and it's one of the biggest departures. I met Bob Ezrin once, and he produced the album. And it's funny, Bob Ezrin, if you don't know, Bob Ezrin did The Wall from Pink Floyd, and he did Destroyer from Kiss, and he's done some big albums, to say the least. And when I met him, of course, I'm like, hey, can I ask you a question about an album? And he's like, yeah, of course. And I asked him about Saturday Night Wrist, and and he's like, why do you want to ask me about that? No one had a good time making this. This album is an album being made by a band on the verge of breaking up. And there's hilarious stories about no one liked working with Bob. Bob didn't like working with Abe, the drummer. They had a real kind of clash somewhere along the lines. And at one point, this is what I heard or read, Abe refused to go into the studio when Bob was there, so they had to alternate schedule. Anyways, the album, the making of the album is a complete disaster, but somehow the songs are just like some of my all-time favorite Deftones songs. And this is like the kind of album where you get into the really esoteric version of Deftones, where it's just like electronic elements are coming into play. Like not dance music, but some of the sounds from dance music, the sub bass, like, you know, the Roland 808s and all these kinds of things. And the songs are fantastic. There's some songs, Rapture is amazing. Beware is a really, really like slow song. It's as a person that likes to play heavy metal, and it's hard for me to play slow and dial that back in. And that song's a great exercise. Cherry Waves is an amazing ambient song. There's so many on this one. If you haven't checked out the Saturday Night Wrist from Deftones, it's quite an incredible album. If you like ambient music and kind of like, you know, taking a whole album in and not just looking for singles or things like that, it's kind of more of a deep dive album. So we have that. Diamond Eyes is the one after that. Kind of similar in a way to Saturday Night Wrist. More similar to Saturday Night Wrist than it would be some of the earlier stuff. Koi no Yukan is the same. Amazing songs on that. A return to kind of more ambient material. Chino's voice kind of really, to me, really sits well in the kind of more ambient tracks that Deftones does. There's just something about the character of his voice that works really well in like kind of a less dense musical arrangements, and his voice is kind of haunting in a way. And yeah, I love it. But so Koi no Yukan, and then honestly, the last two albums from Deftones don't do anything for me. Deftones might be one of my, they're definitely top 20 favorite bands of all time. The first kind of like, if I was to do a top 50 albums, favorites of mine, like 4 of these albums from Deftones are going to be in that list. They've had an immense amount of influence on me, and just how much time I've spent listening to them. And but the new Deftones just it doesn't do anything for me. I don't know what it is, if it's wrong time or whatever. Maybe I should revisit them and see how it goes. But you know, I have gotten to see Deftones live twice, and there's an interesting thing about Deftones. There was a real downtime for the band, and I've heard this about them through the years, where depending on when you catch them, they'll either be one of the best live bands you've ever seen or one of the worst. And I've seen them twice, and I've gotten both experiences. The first time I saw them, awful. It was kind of, you know, I don't know if Chino, he was having a lot of trouble in his life, and not to get into the history of the band that much, but he's having trouble. The band was, you know, not doing so great, and just a bad time for them, and the performance was bad, and I just wasn't into it. It's kind of a shortened set too at a festival, and it wasn't a good time. And then I caught them again. It must have been after the Gore album came out. So, like, I don't remember, 2017, something like that. It was the last time I saw them live, and man, it was a completely different experience. The band was on point. Like, Chino was singing everything amazingly. The band sounded great, and like, the show wasn't a big show. It was maybe, you know, 4,000 people, maybe like 3,000. It wasn't a big enough venue. But yeah, it felt very kind of intimate, and the light show was kind of dimmed down, and yeah, it was a totally different experience. But I'm glad seeing Abe both times kind of like just showed me it's like that guy is like, as far as hard hitters go. There's a famous performance of Deftones playing at Bizarre Festival in like, I don't know, 1998. I think it's just after Around the Fur comes out. And to say he's hitting hard is like the understatement of the year. Like it's like a hammer. And, to keep up energy like that for an entire gig, or, like even, he's still, I think he's dialed it down a bit, but he still plays hard. And, it adds just this like real kind of like reinforcement to the band. Like, there's so many other dynamic things going on that it's just like you've got this like metronome of a guy, and the creativity is off the charts with him. I don't know exactly what his background was, or I haven't seen many interviews with him, honestly, to kind of know where his influences stemmed from. What his background was, anything like that. If I've read anything with him in Modern Drummer, it's forgotten at this point. So that might be actually something I pursue after this video, just to learn more about him as well. But clearly, the Deftones, I don't think the band needs any introduction. I think pretty much everyone watching this channel would be familiar with them. But yeah, Abe Cunningham. Not the most recognizable name in drumming, but man, the influence that guy had on me, just like across the board, technique-wise, arranging drum parts, trying to be creative. I'll never be as creative as him, but it gives me a lot of inspiration to listen to bands like that and see, there would be times at Deftones where you could just play like a straight pattern, and the song would probably be great too. But Abe's always had these ways of coming up with creative ideas, and no kind of songs are the same when it comes to drumming, and he's very good at like inserting his own kind of signature into the songs as well. But so yeah, thought I'd give a little insight into the plethora of Deftones covers that are about to or have already hit the channel. I tend to do that where I will go through bands and just kind of play their as much of their discographies as I know, and so it kind of bundles all these bands together. But it's good for me to remind myself of some of these drummers and songs I really love, and guys that really influenced me early on into expanding my horizons musically and drumming. So yeah, if you haven't checked out Deftones, I encourage you to check them out. Either Around the Fur or Saturday Night Wrist would be my two recommendations. You'll get two different experiences regarding, or whichever one you choose to listen to, or if you listen to both, it can be kind of strange to think that it's the same band that did both, and only about 10 years apart as well. But yeah, amazing discography from them. And Abe Cunningham, if you're looking for any kind of inspiration drumming wise, a song like Digital Bath or Passenger, very moody, very interesting drumming. Something like Beware or Cherry Waves from some of the newer albums, but even from the early stuff, Engine Number 9 or Around the Fur. MX is an amazing song, the last song on Around the Fur. And but yeah, lots to choose from, and enjoy checking him out if you haven't before. So this has been the one about Deftones and Abe Cunningham. Cheers.